So I've been thinking about you saying connecting scales is difficult, connecting patterns. And initially, I agree. It becomes a little easier once you learn. Uh, right now, right, you know, pattern one, um, and once you learn pattern two and pattern five, which would be below pattern one, right, because everything is cyclical. Um, it becomes a little easier, and you start recognizing uh, that generally, there's a few exceptions, um, that if you've got a step and a half spread, right, your next up is only going to be a step spread. Now, obviously, right, you can see there it changes. That's because of our interval pattern for a minor pentatonic scale. But it's never going to be a half step. There's, so you can guarantee that. And that's part of the reason why um, the blues guys, you find them going between major and minor scales, is simply because they played with a basic idea, and what sounded good they played. They weren't locked into, oh no, that was supposed to be a step and a half, not just a step. And so it still fits. Um, so as long as you're playing blues and you don't have a teacher sitting there watching you, um, generally speaking, a step and a half or a whole step is going to get you somewhere. But if we run this out as if we were playing an F, because that gives us the entire fretboard to kind of look at, starting at 1 on our E string for F. Then we see the pattern you're accustomed to, right? Here in kind of maroon. Um, the next pattern is going to take the top notes that you played in your current pattern, and those are going to become your bottom notes. So that's why that there's brown around this maroon, is because what was the top note of your first or your maroon scale has now become the bottom note of your brown or your second scale. And you can see there that then it goes a whole step, then there's your step and a halves next to each other. And that's how I kind of orientate myself on any of the scales, is where is the step and a half. um, and then you've got a whole step. Then because that B string, you have to step up, and obviously anything you do on the E string is going to repeat on the E string. um, and then now what was your high of your second, your brown scale, now becomes your low of your third pattern, which is your green scale. So there you've got a step, a step, a step, and this is the only one that gets a little crazy. There's your step and a half, and then you have to shift up because it hits on that B string to your other step and a half, and then again you repeat your E string. And then we get down to our black scale, which ends up being, again, the lower notes are the top notes of your green scale. So we're in the fourth now with our black, and where we start off with our step and a halves. Um, and then we do our whole step, whole step, whole step. Then we have to repeat our step and a half. So this one has 3 step and a halves, just like our pattern one. And then finally, the top notes of your fourth pattern, your black scale, become the lower notes of your fifth pattern, which, right, magically I use the same color because this 13th fret is the same as your first fret. So that's where it wraps back around. Those notes match those notes. And here I think is probably the easiest pattern, but they just don't teach it. And you have 3 roots in it. It's just not a common one, but you start off with 2 half steps, then there's your 2 whole step, or step and a halves, pardon me. You start off with 2 whole steps, then there's your 2 step and a halves, and then 2 whole steps. So 2 wholes, two half or step and a halves, and then two wholes. That's a pretty straightforward pattern. You just have to find your root with your ring finger, and that'll line you all up for your pointy finger falling down here. All right, connecting scale patterns, hopefully keeping it short and brief, which I always have a hard time doing. With a pattern, on pattern 1, oops. It'd be helpful if this guy knew what he was doing. So there's your pattern 1, right? If you want to move up, you're going to go to the top of the last pattern you were working on. And now we're going to run pattern 2. Pattern 2 starts with a whole step and then does your step and a halves, stays low for a whole step, comes up for whole steps. So let's see if I can do it. That would be 8, 10, 7, 10, 7, 10, 7, 9, 8, 10, 8, 10. I didn't screw that up. Okay, so, and that's still an A scale. Your root changes its location, right? We know that's, the root for A, so we'd want to focus there. And then if you were, again, in that pattern 1, and you wanted to play below it, you'd have to go to pattern 5, which I think is the easiest pattern, although it's not commonly used. I mean, it's not like it's irregular or anything, it's just that everybody learns this pattern 1 first, and I actually think pattern 5 is simpler to remember, a little harder to execute, just because of finger location. So, but your A would be on the 5th fret, so you're going to come down a whole step so that the top of the pattern 5 lands at the bottom of the pattern 1. So you're going to do a whole step, a step and a half, a step and a half, a whole step, and a whole step. That one doesn't fit. There's your blue note. So it's that easy to put the patterns together. Don't worry about others. If you want to first work on just becoming comfortable with having your pattern 1, and you could do it on G too, which might be where you like playing, but then you're going to end up using open strings to get those two parts. Okay, but it's pretty straightforward. If you prefer, the heading up one, and that's where that BB's box comes from, because that shift at the B string, because every other string is tuned to fourth, except the B string is a third. Because of that, here, you get that note, and that note, and that note, and that note, and that note, right? So BB liked playing around with that triangle pattern that we've talked about before. And that comes from this, second shape. Anyhow, that's, I think I sent you the picture. If I didn't, I'll send that. You'll get this and a little added piece of video that was done before this. Trying to make this work.